So this all happened back in 2019, right before everything went completely weird with the world. My cousin Emma had just gotten engaged to her longtime best friend, Tyler. They were high school sweethearts, super close, like one of those couples you just know are going to end up together forever. Anyway, they couldn't afford a big wedding, and then COVID hit, so they ended up having a tiny ceremony in a park near where they lived in Tasmania. No big reception, no guests flying in, just a short ceremony with a few local friends and a picnic. But Emma's always been a romantic, so even without the whole wedding party, she still wanted their first night as a married couple to feel magical. She found this cute little cabin listed on some vacation rental site. It was tucked away in this coastal town called Black Hollow, about an hour's drive from where they lived. It was advertised as a secluded love nest with forest views, and the pictures looked charming. Fairy lights on the porch, big windows, a view of the sea. Totally her vibe. They drove out there the afternoon of their wedding, still dressed up a little, just soaking up the excitement of starting their life together. The cabin was nestled at the end of a narrow gravel path just behind this old farmhouse. It looked kind of forgotten, like no one had stayed there in a while. Still, the key was under the mat, and everything inside was clean, if a bit outdated. It was a one-room setup with a small bathroom and kitchenette. There was a fireplace, an old couch, and a bed that creaked even when you breathed near it. Emma said the place had a weird stillness to it, like the kind of silence where you suddenly realize there's not even any birds chirping. But she didn't think much of it at the time. They had a simple dinner, unpacked their overnight bags, and started settling in. Tyler went to brush his teeth, and Emma was putting their stuff in drawers when she found something odd. Tucked inside the bottom drawer under the bed was a red leather notebook. Not bright red, dull, almost brownish like dried blood. It had no title or label, just sitting there like it was waiting for someone to open it. Emma thought it was maybe a guide from the host, you know, the kind that tells you where the nearest shops are or how to use the fireplace. But when she opened it, she realized it was something else. It was filled with handwritten notes. Not the friendly, "we loved our stay" kind either. The first few entries were tame, but even then, something felt off. One note said, "Lovely view but couldn't sleep. Kept hearing something outside." Another said, "Felt like someone was watching us from the trees." She kept flipping through the pages, and that's when it got worse. One page read, "Woke up at 3:17 a.m. to loud knocking on the window. Pulled back the curtain. No one there." Another said, "Don't trust the man who says he's the caretaker. He isn't." A few pages later, someone had scribbled in huge, shaky letters, "If you're here, don't stay after midnight." Emma froze. She read the last line over and over, her hands starting to tremble. That's when Tyler came out of the bathroom and asked her what was wrong. She showed him the notebook. They sat on the edge of the bed, flipping through more of it together. A lot of the pages had been blacked out, like someone had taken a thick marker and scribbled over entire paragraphs. Tyler turned on his phone's flashlight and held it behind one of the blacked out pages. And they could just barely make out some of the writing underneath. Words like trap, can't leave, and watching from the woods. They both felt it then. That kind of tight, cold feeling in your chest when you just know something's wrong. Tyler got up to check the front door. That's when they heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching softly across the gravel path outside. The doorknob turned with a soft click. A man's voice called out, low and casual. "Just checking. Everything okay there?" Emma said. Every hair on her body stood up. That voice, it didn't sound like someone who worked there. It sounded like someone trying really hard to sound normal. They didn't answer. They didn't move. Through the tiny keyhole in the door, Tyler saw the man step inside, He was wearing gloves, a black jacket. No emotion on his face, just calm like he did this kind of thing often. He walked over to the little kitchen table and placed a small black duffel bag on it. Then he started taking things out. Slowly. A flashlight, some rope, something that looked like a hunting knife. That was when Tyler grabbed Emma's arm and pointed to the bathroom window. It was tiny, barely big enough to crawl through, but it was their only shot. Emma climbed onto the sink, pushed the window open, and squeezed through. Tyler followed. They dropped onto the cold ground outside and ran, barefoot in their wedding clothes, straight into the dark forest. Branches scraped their skin. They couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, but they didn't stop running. Eventually, after what felt like forever, they reached a narrow road. A single car approached, a delivery van, and they ran straight into the middle of the road, waving their arms like maniacs. The driver stopped, confused, but kind. They climbed in, breathless, and begged him to take them anywhere that wasn't there. He drove them to the nearest police station. They told the whole story: the cabin, the notebook, the man with the bag. The police went to check, but when they came back, they said the place looked perfectly normal. Nothing out of place. No man, no bag, nothing strange. The owner, when contacted, said no one else had a key. She hadn't hired any caretaker, Emma, and Tyler insisted they check for the red notebook. They searched. Every drawer, every corner, no notebook. A few weeks later, they tried to find the listing again. Gone. Not just the listing, the entire host profile, like it had never existed. Emma doesn't talk about it much anymore, but she always checks every vacation rental. Review now. Reads them line by line, looks through every drawer and every place she stays, and she never books anything without a deadbolt on the door. Hey, so this is a story I don't usually tell, but since you're into creepy stuff, you might want to hear it. My name's Alex, and this happened back in the fall of 2017. I was 23 and completely burnt out from college and 2 part-time jobs. I needed a serious break, so I thought, why not get away for a weekend, just me and some peace and quiet? Sounded good at the time. I went on this site called Haven Stay. It's like Airbnb, just smaller and a little sketchier. I found this little cabin listed in a place called Hollow Creek, about 2.5 hours from where I live in Greenville. The listing called it a private forest retreat for solo travelers. The photos showed a cute little place. Wood-paneled. Walls, a porch swing, a tiny kitchen, 1 bedroom, and a thick forest surrounding it like a hug. The host's name was Gary. He looked normal. Middle-aged guy, baseball cap, friendly smile. The reviews were mostly good. Everyone kept saying the same thing though, which started to feel weird the more I read. Follow Gary's rules and everything will be fine. I thought it was just people being dramatic. I mean, how strict could some house rules be? I clicked book now. The day I was supposed to leave, Gary sent me a message that gave me a weird feeling in my gut. It said, just remember 2 things while you're at the cabin. Don't unplug the lamp on the kitchen counter and don't open the basement door, no matter what you hear. That was it. No explanation. I actually laughed at first. Thought it was some kind of local legend thing to add charm to the place. I showed it to my cousin Mia while we were grabbing coffee. She raised an eyebrow. That's not normal, that's horror movie stuff, you're still going. Come on, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. It's probably just an old wiring issue or something. She didn't look convinced. Okay, but if you don't come back, I'm not driving out there to rescue your ghost. We both laughed. Kinda. The drive up was long and quiet. Once I passed the last gas station, the cell signal dropped and the road narrowed into this gravel path lined with towering pine trees. Every so often I thought I saw movement between the trees, but it was probably just animals, or my nerves. Finally, I saw the cabin. It looked exactly like the photos. Tiny porch, creaky steps, and those tall trees crowding close around it. I used the key code Gary gave me and stepped inside. It was warm, cozy even. A soft hum came from the kitchen lamp. It gave off this dull yellow light. Everything else was quiet. Still. I dropped my bag in the bedroom and started exploring. The bathroom was small but clean. The living room had a dusty old armchair and a shelf with books that hadn't been touched in years. Then I noticed the door at the end of the hall. It was thick. Old wood, cracked paint, and a shiny metal padlock on it. That had to be the basement door. I felt a sudden weird chill run up my spine. I left it alone. That night I cooked a frozen pizza, curled up with a book and tried to relax. No phone, no internet. Just me and the forest. At first it was kinda nice, until around midnight. That's when I started hearing it. Thump, 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 slow, dull, and rhythmic, like someone knocking from beneath the house. I froze. It was coming from the basement. I tiptoed down the hallway. The padlock was still on the door, but the noise kept going. I didn't open it. I couldn't. I locked myself in the bedroom and waited out the night, barely blinking. The next morning I felt ridiculous. I told myself it was the pipes or an animal under the cabin. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. I made some coffee and sat in the kitchen. That weird lamp on the counter buzzed louder than before. Then it flickered, once, twice, and suddenly pulsed bright like someone had flipped a switch inside it. I jumped up and backed away. I went outside needing air, maybe a signal. But my phone was still dead. That's when I heard it. Alex. The voice came from the trees. It was my voice. Not just similar. Exactly my voice. Same tone. Same tiredness. I bolted back into the cabin. The basement door was wide open. The padlock? Gone. Not on the floor. Not hanging off the handle. Just gone. Something told me to run. But I couldn't. Not yet. I grabbed my bag, raced to my car, turned the key, nothing. The engine coughed and died. Then I saw it. At the tree line stood someone, no, something, wearing my clothes, same jacket, same boots, same face. It stared at me without blinking. I ran, back to the cabin, locked the door, and shoved the armchair under the knob. That night, the footsteps came back. But this time they weren't behind the basement door. They were in the hallway. Tap, tap, tap. Then I heard a knock at the bedroom window. I looked outside. Nothing. Morning came. A small wooden box sat on the porch. Inside it was a note written, in messy handwriting. Go down or I come in now. The lamp in the kitchen was off. Dead. The basement door gaped open, black and still. I didn't want to, but I walked toward it, step by step like I was being pulled. The air grew colder with every stair I descended. At the bottom I stopped. There it was. The thing from the woods, standing still in the shadows. Same face, same eyes. Except now, it smiled. I turned and ran, like my life depended on it. Up the stairs, out the door, into the woods. I didn't care where I was going. I just had to get away. Behind me, I heard it running too. Heavy, fast footsteps crunching through leaves. I kept going. Branches slapped my face. Thorns ripped my sleeves. I tripped over roots, gasping for air. Finally, I dove behind a fallen log and stayed there motionless, heart pounding like a drum in my throat. Silence. I don't know how long I stayed hidden, maybe hours, But when I crept back to the cabin, my car started like nothing had happened. I didn't look back. When I got home, I logged into my Havenstay account, just to leave a review warning others. But someone had already written one under my name. Left a bit early, but next time I'll stay longer. It was the summer of 1996 when everything just stopped feeling right. Not in a big, dramatic way. More like a quiet, creeping heaviness that settled over everything. I had just finished my junior year of high school, and things at home were weird. My older cousin Danny had moved in with us after her mom, my aunt, passed away suddenly. My dad, Steve, had picked up a second job and was barely home, and my stepmom, Linda, was constantly trying to hold the house together like nothing had changed. But something had. Nobody talked about it. We just sort of drifted around the house like ghosts. One night, Danny and I were flipping through the newspaper at the kitchen table. She circled a tiny ad with her pen and slid it over to me. "Cabin rental," she said. "Out near Silver Pine Lake. 3 nights. Dirt cheap." I looked at it. No photos, just a little description. Old family cabin. Peaceful. Private. Ideal. For rest and reset. "You think Dad would go for it?" I asked. She shrugged. "Linda might. If we tell her it's for, like, bonding or whatever." Somehow, it worked. The next weekend, Linda packed a cooler with food. Dad filled the tank and we drove 3 hours into the middle of nowhere. The cabin was odd. Not in a horror movie kind of way. More like it didn't belong to any time. The wood siding was weather-worn. The windows were covered in thick curtains. And there was this old rocking chair on the porch that creaked whenever the wind blew. No neighbors, no cell signal, no streetlights. At first it was kinda nice. Quiet. Still. We made hot dogs over the fire pit and played cards on the porch. For one night, it actually felt like we were all there again. Like we hadn't been broken for months. But then weird stuff started happening. The second night, I woke up to the sound of something scratching under my bed. Not like a mouse, more like fingernails on wood. Slow. Steady. I froze. I wanted to call out to Danny, who was in the bunk below mine, but I couldn't get the words out. The scratching stopped. And then from under the blanket I felt something touch my ankle. Cold and dry. Like the hand of something that had been buried a long time ago. I screamed. Danny shot up, hit her head on the top bunk, and turned on the light. There was nothing there. No sign of anything under the bed. But the feeling stuck with me, clinging to my skin like dust. The next morning, I didn't say anything. Neither did Danny. But she looked tired, really tired. Like she hadn't slept either. Linda made pancakes and acted like everything was fine. Dad left to check out a nearby trail he remembered from when he was a kid. That left me and Danny alone. We decided to explore the cabin. It wasn't big, just 2 bedrooms, a tiny bathroom, and an old living room with furniture that smelled like mothballs. There was a locked door near the back that didn't seem to lead anywhere. No key, no handle, just this old brass latch at the top. We ignored it at first. Tried to anyway. That afternoon, while Linda was napping and Dad was still gone, Danny found a photo album tucked behind some books in the living room. Inside were old black and white photos. A family, Mom, Dad, 2 kids, posing in front of the same cabin decades ago. But on the last page there was a single photo. A girl, maybe 6 or 7, sitting on the porch steps, holding a stuffed rabbit with one ear ripped off. Her eyes looked wrong. Not scared, not sad, just blank.
Dotas pasata na sulfurtke in the kendo she peramda shasula she nashadi papa jumper dear sot stabat to leant the chavi. Nästa papuswi. Teanke on pottasolok. Entomo deta kija edel koatatu pareto exaturgetabili edetata.
Scrawled in messy handwriting was a date. July 13th, 1966. That was exactly 30 years ago. To the day, we didn't talk about it. Not really. But that night something changed in the air. Heavier. Thicker. Like the cabin itself was holding its breath. Around 2 a.m. I heard whispering, just outside our room. I thought maybe Danny had left the bunk, but she was still below me, breathing steady. I sat up and looked toward the hallway. The door creaked open. There in the dark stood a shape. Not a person. Not exactly. Just this tall, thin figure that looked stretched out like it had been pulled from a shadow. It didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stood there watching. I couldn't scream. Couldn't even breathe. I blinked. And it was gone. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, Danny looked pale. She made coffee and stared out the window for a long time before finally saying, "Did you see it?" I nodded. We waited until Linda and Dad went for a walk, then went straight to the locked door. This time, Danny had a screwdriver. It took a few minutes, but the latch finally popped open. The door creaked as we pulled it open. Inside was a narrow staircase leading down into complete darkness. We should have left it alone. We both knew that, but we didn't. The stairs creaked under our feet as we stepped down. The air was cold, damp. It smelled like mold and something else, something older. The basement was mostly empty, except for a small wooden chair in the middle of the room. And on the chair sat that same stuffed rabbit from the photo, ear ripped and all. Beside it, carved into the floorboards, were dozens of tiny handprints, child-sized, burned into the wood. Danny grabbed my arm. "We need to go now." We rushed back upstairs and slammed the door shut, sliding a chair against it. That night we begged Dad to leave early. He rolled his eyes but agreed to pack up the next morning. That final night I barely slept. Around 3 a.m., there was a knock at the door. Just one. Soft. Then scratching. Slow, like a nail being dragged, across the wood. We stayed frozen, holding our breath. In the morning, we found the porch covered in tiny soot-black footprints, like a child had walked barefoot across ashes. We left without saying a word. We never talked about it again. Not really. Danny and I tried once, but it was too hard, too strange. We don't know who that girl was. We don't know what happened to her. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still feel that cold hand on my ankle. And the worst part? That ad we saw in the paper? We tried to find it again when we got home. It was never there. So this happened a few years ago, back in the summer of 2004, when I was still living in a small town called Elmridge, way out in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania. I was 22 at the time, fresh out of community college, and working odd hours at a warehouse across town. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Anyway, one Friday night I was driving home after a long, late shift. It was around 11:45 p.m. The roads in Elmridge were the kind of roads where you'd rarely see more than a couple cars at night. Just long stretches of dark highway lined with thick trees and old wooden fences. The air was sticky with summer. Heat, and the only sound outside was the hum of cicadas and the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. I was maybe 15 minutes from home when I noticed flashing lights up ahead. At first I thought it was just someone pulled over for speeding or maybe a busted taillight. Nothing unusual. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't a normal traffic stop. There was a police cruiser parked sideways on the shoulder with its red and blue lights spinning, and right next to it was a beat-up sedan just sitting smack in the middle of the road. No hazard lights. No movement, just parked. Immediately, something felt off. I slowed down and kept my distance, squinting through my windshield to make out what was going on. The whole scene had this weird, frozen quality, like someone hit pause on a movie. The police officer was standing outside his cruiser, leaning slightly toward the driver of the sedan. They were talking, but not in a calm, casual way. The guy in the car looked panicked. He kept raising his hands and shaking his head. I rolled down my window a little, curious and honestly kind of nosy. Then I heard the guy shout, "I swear to God I didn't touch it. It was already like that. I didn't hit it. I didn't hit anything." That's when I saw the cop swing his flashlight toward the middle of the road, a few feet in front of the car. He took a couple steps forward and crouched slightly, keeping the light aimed at something on the pavement. I followed his gaze, and that's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a dog. Maybe someone's pet had wandered into the road and gotten hurt. But no, it was a deer, a full-grown deer. But the way it was sitting made my stomach turn. The deer wasn't lying down like it had been hit. It was sitting, upright, in this unnatural twisted position. Its legs were folded beneath it in a way that didn't look physically possible. Like if you tried to fold a plastic toy wrong and it just kind of bent but didn't break. It almost looked posed, like someone had picked it up and carefully arranged its body in this creepy broken yoga pose. And then it moved. Not much, just its head. It turned toward me, slow and smooth, and looked directly at my car. Our eyes met, and that's when everything inside me screamed to get away. I can't explain it exactly, but its eyes weren't right. Deer usually have shiny, glassy eyes that reflect light. These didn't. They were black, but not like a normal dark color. They looked like holes, like someone had scooped out the eyeballs and replaced them with pure shadow. No light reflected back. Nothing. Just black. And worse, they were huge. Way too big for its head. Like someone had stretched the sockets just enough to make it look almost human, but not quite. Its head was slightly lowered, like it was ashamed, but the eyes were locked right on me. I couldn't look away. My hands were still on the wheel, but I couldn't move them. My foot hovered over the gas pedal, frozen, for maybe 5 seconds, maybe more. I felt like I was stuck in place. Everything else around me went quiet. I couldn't even hear the crickets anymore, no cars, no wind. Just this low, heavy silence like something was watching, waiting. I finally broke out of it and rolled up my window fast. My skin felt cold, even though the night was warm. I was so close to the deer I could have leaned out and touched it. The thing didn't flinch, didn't blink. It just kept watching as I slowly drove past. And that's when it got even weirder. As I passed it, everything felt off. Like time wasn't working right. I remember looking at my dashboard clock, and for what felt like a full minute, the numbers didn't change. My foot was on the gas, but it didn't feel like I was moving. The trees outside the window stayed still, like I was driving through a photograph. Then suddenly, everything snapped back. The road looked normal again. The air was loud with bugs and rustling leaves. My headlights stretched out ahead of me, and the cop car and the weird deer were gone in the rear view. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. When I got home, I ran straight inside and locked the door. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my keys. I didn't even turn on the lights. Just went straight to my bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and tried to make sense of what I'd seen. After a while, I got out my laptop and started searching online. I typed in things like deer staring, with black eyes and deer acting strange at night. Eventually, I came across something called chronic wasting disease. It's a real thing, kind of like mad cow disease, but for deer. It messes with their brains, makes them act weird, walk in circles, drool, even look kind of zombified. But the deer I saw wasn't sick. It wasn't twitching or stumbling. It didn't look confused or slow. It looked intentional. Like it knew exactly what it was doing. Like it wanted me to see it. And that feeling, that sense that something else was in that deer, it hasn't gone away. I talked to my cousin Max about it a few days later. He used to be into weird stuff. Urban, legends, paranormal things, that kind of thing. When I told him what I saw, he didn't laugh. He just asked me, dead serious, "Did it follow you home?" That question still messes me up. Because since that night, sometimes I feel like something is watching me. I'll be walking through the woods near my house and suddenly hear twigs snapping behind me, even when no one's there. Or I'll wake up in the middle of the night and think I hear tapping on the window, but when I check, there's nothing. One time, a few weeks later, I was heading to my car early in the morning and saw hoof prints in the driveway. Not like regular deer tracks either, they were deeper, heavier, and they circled the car more than once before wandering off into the woods. So yeah, I don't know what I saw out there on that road. Maybe it really was just a sick deer in a weird position. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me after a long shift. But deep down, I don't believe that. Deep down, I think I saw something else. Something that wasn't a deer. And I really hope I never see it again.